The death order was signed before sunrise, the ink still fresh when the desert wind began to stir the dust. A single sheet of paper, passed from hand to hand, decided that an Apache woman would not live to see another night. Her fate was settled in silence, far from her voice, far from the truth. She stood on the edge of the settlement with her hands bound, the rope cutting into skin already marked by hunger and loss, while the town prepared itself to believe that killing her would bring peace. No one expected history to hesitate. No one expected one man to step in and refuse to let the story end there. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one brave decision, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who still believes in humanity, and subscribe to the channel Wild West Tale, because stories like this survive only when people choose to care. The woman had been walking for days before they found her. Her village had been scattered by fire and gun smoke, her family torn away in the chaos of a conflict she never chose. She carried no weapon when she crossed into ranch land, only exhaustion and a quiet determination to stay alive. But fear has always been louder than truth, especially in places where loss has hardened hearts. When a nearby outpost was attacked by unknown raiders, blame needed a face, and hers was the easiest to mark. She was taken before she could explain, before anyone asked where she had come from or what she had already endured. To the town, she became a symbol of danger rather than a human being. They spoke of her as if she were the war itself, as if ending her life would end their fear. They ignored the way her shoulders trembled in the cold nights, the way she flinched at sudden movement, the way she stared into the distance as if part of her was already gone. The paper that sealed her fate passed through official hands, stamped and signed by men who told themselves this was necessary, that survival demanded cruelty. It was easier to sign than to look her in the eyes. The rancher lived beyond the town's edge, where the land was rough and unforgiving. He had built his life there after losing almost everything else. Years earlier, illness had taken his wife, and grief had hollowed his home until it echoed with absence. His days were filled with work that numbed the pain and nights that reminded him why he kept going. He did not involve himself in town matters. He trusted animals more than people and believed that silence was safer than hope. The first time he saw the Apache woman, it was by chance. He had ridden into town for supplies, his mind focused on practical things, when he noticed the crowd gathered near the holding post. She stood there, wrists tied, face bruised, yet something about her presence stopped him. It was not anger that struck him, but dignity. Even in captivity, she carried herself as someone who had already lost everything and refused to lose herself too. He felt a discomfort he could not name, a tug at a part of him he thought grief had buried. He learned quickly what the paper meant and what the town intended to do. The decision had already been made, spoken of as if it were a task to be completed rather than a life to be ended. The rancher listened, said little, and rode back home with the image of her steady eyes burned into his thoughts. That night, sleep would not come easily. Memories returned uninvited, of standing helpless as his own family slipped away, of wishing someone had fought harder for them. By morning, the question he could no longer avoid settled heavily in his chest. If he stayed silent now, would he be any different from the men who signed that paper? The days that followed were filled with quiet resistance. The rancher began asking questions no one wanted to answer. He spoke to traders who had passed through the area, to scouts who knew the land better than rumors did. He learned that the raid blamed on the woman had happened far from where she had been captured. He saw how easily facts were ignored when fear offered a simpler story. Each time he returned to town, the tension grew thicker. Some warned him to stop digging. Others mocked his concern, accusing him of siding with the enemy. The Apache woman watched from the margins, uncertain what to make of the man who kept returning. She had learned long ago that hope could be a dangerous thing, something that lifted you only to let you fall harder. Still, something shifted each time she saw him stand alone against the certainty of her death. For the first time since her capture, she wondered if survival was still possible. As the execution day drew closer, the rancher felt the cost of his choice closing in. Supplies were delayed. Neighbors who once nodded in passing now turned away. He found his cattle harassed, his fences cut, silent warnings meant to remind him of his place. There were moments, alone under the wide sky, when doubt crept in. He asked himself if one life was worth losing everything he had rebuilt. Each time, the memory of that paper, of how easily death had been signed away, hardened his resolve. On the morning meant to end her life, the town gathered as they always did for grim necessities. The woman was brought forward, weaker now, her body bearing the marks of captivity, yet her spirit remained unbroken. The paper waited to be fulfilled, its authority unquestioned. Just as the sun climbed high enough to cast sharp shadows across the ground, the rancher rode in, dust rising behind him like a challenge. He brought with him proof, not just in words, but in witnesses and records, in testimony gathered through persistence rather than force. He laid bare the contradictions in the town's story, the convenience of their fear, the truth they had chosen to ignore. He reminded them that killing an innocent would not make them safer, only smaller. He spoke not with anger, but with a gravity shaped by loss, by the knowledge of what it meant to watch life slip away without a fight. The moment stretched, fragile and uncertain. Anger flared in some faces, doubt in others. The sheriff hesitated, the weight of responsibility suddenly heavier than the paper he held. It was not one argument that changed the outcome, but many small reckonings happening at once. A mother in the crowd thought of her own children. A farmer remembered a time when mercy had saved his life. Fear loosened its grip just enough for conscience to breathe. When the decision unraveled, it did so quietly. The ropes were loosened. The death order lost its power not because it was torn apart, but because enough people refused to carry it out. The Apache woman stood free under the open sky, disbelief washing over her in waves. She did not cry or collapse. She simply breathed, as if learning again how to exist in a world that had nearly erased her. The rancher did not claim victory. He knew that saving her life was only the beginning. Hatred does not vanish overnight, and wounds take time to heal. He offered her shelter on his land, not as a savior, but as someone who understood what it meant to start over with nothing. She accepted cautiously, carrying with her the weight of everything she had lost and the fragile possibility of something new. Life on the ranch was hard, but honest. Days were filled with work that demanded presence rather than fear. Slowly, trust grew through shared effort and quiet understanding. The land responded to care in ways people often did not, and together they coaxed life from soil that had once seemed hopeless. In time, the woman's strength returned, not just to her body, but to her spirit. She shared knowledge of the land, of plants and seasons, of resilience passed down through generations. The rancher listened, learning that survival took many forms. The town watched from a distance, uncertain how to respond. Some never changed their minds, clinging to old fears. Others began to see the woman not as a threat, but as proof that their certainty had been wrong. Children grew curious rather than afraid. Traders carried the story beyond the settlement, and as it traveled, it changed people who had never even been there. Years passed, and the moment that once seemed like a dangerous gamble became a turning point spoken of with quiet respect. The rancher's land flourished, not just with crops, but with a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever. The Apache woman became part of the place, not as a symbol, but as a person whose life had continued when it was supposed to end. History did not remember the names on the death order. It remembered the man who refused to let it stand. It remembered that one choice, made against fear and convenience, could alter the course of many lives. In a world that often rewards silence, his decision proved that courage still mattered. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that one person can still make a difference, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Wild West Tales so more powerful stories can reach the people who need them. And before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel. Because history is not shaped only by those who sign orders of death, but by those brave enough to stand up, refuse them, and choose humanity instead.